Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have my July TBR. Firstly, I would like to go through the books that I did not get to in June and decide whether or not they are going to be making it onto this month's TBR. So, the books that I unfortunately did not get to last month are The Fraternity of the Estranged by Brian Anderson, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr., Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, Brief Lives by Anita Brookner, The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, Soul Tourists by Bernardine Evaristo, A Game of Hide and Seek by Elizabeth Taylor, The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett. There were also 4 other books that I did not get to this month, and they were My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, Fieldwork by Belle Bathurst, La Plus Belle Storie Antica Roma, and The Collected Stories of Katherine Mansfield. These final 2 are books that I'm going to be reading over a long expanse of time. Admittedly, I did not get to any of Katherine Mansfield's stories this month, but I did read one of the comics out of La Plus Belle Storie in Antica Roma, which is something that I am using to further my Italian education. In terms of My Brilliant Friend and Fieldwork, I won't be continuing with them. Not now, anyway. With My Brilliant Friend, I think I'm going to wait until we get the paperback in the shop again, simply because my loan ran out from the library before I had a chance to read it, and as it had been reserved, I couldn't renew it. And Fieldwork is a book that I was reading, and I was reading this book because it is looking at farming today and how some farmers are villainised. Bella Bathurst is going and speaking to all the different cogs in the machine of what makes farms work. But even though I don't know much about farming, everything I was reading I already knew about. And although there is some really great prose in this book, and if you want to see a celebration of farming and the countryside and you don't know about that world yourself, then this is a great book to go to. But for me, it very much felt like I was reading stuff that I knew. I don't usually go to non-fiction in the hopes of educating myself about anything new, but I felt no need to read the book because I felt like I was getting shown everything I already knew. I have started Soul Tourists and didn't get far into it, but I want to dedicate time this month to this one. I have also started reading Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, and I put this book aside alongside How to Survive a Plague because I started reading another book. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the mood for a fantastical novel when I read this, but the prose so far has been fantastic. Very much feel for the character's struggle of being trans and having a family who aren't accepting of that, refusing to see how it could intersect with their culture. I'm interested to see how this book progresses. Next week, I will be visiting my friend Joy, and I want to return some of the books that she has lent me to her. Therefore, I am currently reading Brief Lives by Anita Brookner. I've only read 2 chapters so far, but I do think, at the moment, this might be some of the better writing I've seen from this author. We also know that I am reading a lot of backlist books currently, and that really fits in with that. I also have White Mule by William Carlos Williams to read, and I want to try and read this week as well. It's only 234 pages, but it's an incredibly musty tome, so I have this worry that I'm just going to sneeze the entire time whilst reading it. Joy also lent me The Lie by Helen Dunmore nearly a year ago now, and I would like to get this finished before I see her. One book I haven't even attempted yet is The Collected Short Stories of Elizabeth Taylor, and I might just return this to Joy unread. I love a short story, I love Elizabeth Taylor's prose, but I just took this book off Joy in September and I haven't touched it yet because there are so many short stories, and had I read just one story a day I could have finished this by now. So I think I might just get my own copy and avoid any of the guilt that I'm currently feeling at having had this for so long. Personally, I think that I want to keep all of the books from last month on my TBR. I think that when it comes to me creating TBRs, it's all about these are the books that I want to read. But I'd like to read them in a month, but there is no finite time in which I need to have them read. Another book I'm thinking of reading is A Question of Upbringing by Anthony Powell, and this is the first in a Dance to the Music of Time series. I saved this set of books from the bin at work. They weren't being sold because of the age of them, although they are in quite considerably good condition for what they are. The only one I'm missing is the 8th book, and similar to what I just said about Anita Brookner, these are also backlist titles that were released in the 50s, and that seems to be the era I'm reading most from at the moment. I would like to start this series with this rather short volume. Another short book that I want to get to is Winesberg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. Regarding Anita Brookner, on the cover of Brief Lives, Penelope Fitzgerald is blurbed, and I have her book Offshore here. I purchased this book from the charity shop a few months ago because this is about a community of folk who live on the canals. I have rather enjoyed all of my walks down the canals for the last few years, down the towpaths, and recently wondered what it would be like to live on a narrowboat. I have looked into the costs of it. I have considered it a lot, but unfortunately I cannot afford a boat. I also wonder what it would be like to get over 400 books onto a narrowboat. However, I have since discovered that there is a library on a narrowboat somewhere near Liverpool. It was on the Granada reports anyway. But because of my interest in that way of life, I saw this book, I'm interested in this book. Again, it's rather short, so look at me, all these short books. I'm not just trying to bump up the amount of books I've read this year. It just seems that the writers that I like write short books. Now, this book, I don't know whether I want to read this month. It's Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. And I wanted to read this book ever since I first heard about it. Then this week I was reminded I owned it because the author just won an award for this book, and it seems an apt time to get to it. However, this is more of a tentative addition to the TBR. Another book that is a tentative addition is The Claverings or The Claverings by Anthony Trollope. Someone mentioned this book on Instagram and I went looking into it. I can't remember the plot at all, but I keep thinking I want to read this book, so I may as well add it to the TBR and spend a few months on it. This isn't one I think that I will read the entirety of in July in any case. Another book that I'm going to be spending 2 months on is The Karamazov Brothers by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and I am buddy reading this with Emily of Noval Novels. I will leave a link to her channel in the description. This edition was translated by Ignat Abzi. I believe this is the edition that Juan of Bookish Islander reviewed last year. I wanted to read it. Emily mentioned it earlier this year. I think we planned this buddy read around about March, April time. Hopefully Emily and I are going to have a lot to discuss from this. These tabs here are just to say what portion I've got to read to for each week. A book that I was sent for review is Test Signal, which is an anthology of Northern writing, and I definitely want to read and review this one sooner rather than later, as this book is released on the 8th of July, and I often champion Northern writers. I recognise that I didn't tell you what a lot of these books were about, and quite honestly that's because I don't know myself. The ones that I've been lent, I have been lent because the person lending them to me thought that they were books I would enjoy. Otherwise, I mentioned what all the others were about in June, so you'd have to go and watch that video. I don't know anything about the Karamazov brothers, apart from there is a bit of a murder and some bleak comedy, and a lot of people enjoy it. If you've read any of these books and think that I should prioritise them some over others, then do let me know in the comments. I hope that you enjoyed this list, and until next time, that is all.